You're listening to the Love Over Addiction podcast. Hey, at the end of this episode, stay tuned because I have a little bit of a PS that I recorded the next day that I think you'll love to hear. Hello. How are you guys doing? I am doing well. My kids are back in school, and I'm not going to lie, it's lovely. I love my children. I do. But school is good. School is helpful for me mentally, if you know what I mean. Get that little bit of a break, and thank goodness they're all still in school. By the time this comes out, they might be back home doing online learning, and that will just be a disaster, but who cares? Whatever. We're just going to take it one day at a time and be grateful that they have a place to go during the day. And I am grateful for my peace and quiet time. So yay. And I'm sure you guys are too. Although some of you, I'm sure, are electing to do online school, and kudos to you. Man, you guys are super women, so much better than I am for choosing to do online school, because that requires a boatload of patience, a lot of organization, and amazing math skills, none of which I have. So let's talk. Let's talk, guys. I want to talk about codependency. I'm writing a program, and I shouldn't even say I'm writing a program because it takes me like about a year to write a program, at least. Love Over Addiction took me several years to write because I research everything to death and like leave no stone unturned. And I'm not bragging. It's sort of annoying, and you can ask my family. So I'm writing this new program about codependency, and it's driving my family nuts because all I can talk about now is codependency. And like now I'm looking at all of my kids and I'm like, that's codependent. Just so you know, like, let's discuss this. And this is a really funny story. And then I promise I'll get into like some helpful stuff for you guys. But I have a daughter who is amazing, and she is 17 years old, and she's starting to develop acne. Don't worry, I've got her permission to say that. And so I like bought this light, this contraption that like, it's like red light, blue light thing, and you can put it on your face, and you're supposed to leave it there for 30 minutes, and then it's supposed to help with your acne. I don't know if it works, but I'm all about contraptions. And so the thing is, it's sort of like a shield. There's no eye holes in it or mouth holes. So you kind of like, it's like a shield that you put on your face, but you can't do anything when you have it on your face for 30 minutes. I promise this is relevant to codependency. So she is like, Mom, I really need to use this. I'm breaking out. And I'm like, great. Let me help you set it up. So she's laying in her bed, and she's got we turn it on, and we put the shield on over her face, and I use it and I fall asleep a lot of times using it because there's nothing for you to do. It's actually quite meditative. So then I'm always so worried like about my kids getting into bad relationships or dealing with addiction because, you know, we worry. We're moms, and we've experienced this pain, and we don't want our kids to feel it too. So I'm like, one of my greatest fears is like, I'm always trying to educate my kids about addiction, and everything that I'm teaching you and that I'm learning too, I want to teach my kids. So I set her up. So she's got the shield on her face, and I am listening to an audio book on tape about codependency, and it's quite dry. I'm going to tell you, like, it is, I kind of zone out, and I have to rewind it every few minutes because I'm like, what? Like it's a little bland. I'm not going to lie, but I was listening to it, and I put it on for her, And then this is terrible. I am not proud, although I kind of am. I pressed play on my audiobook about codependency, this dry book, and I put my phone just out of reach. So even if she tried to like feel around the bed for it, she couldn't find it. And then I walked out of the room. And she's like, Mom, I don't want to listen to this. I am not codependent for the 15th time. And I'm like, just in case, honey, because you might not be codependent, but I don't want you to be in a relationship with somebody who is. So this will be for your good. Love you. And walked away. 30 minutes later, she took the shield off her face. She's like, I'm never telling you when I'm doing that acne treatment again, because that was torture. But then she came home yesterday and she's like, I'm now driving my friends nuts with this codependency thing, Mom. So thanks. And I'm like, yes, we're teaching other generations. So that's how crazy I get when I write a program. It takes me forever and I go all in. And it's a little obsessive. And my family's like, no, not another program. We don't want to talk about this. Anyways. Okay, so let's talk about codependency. Why don't I talk about it with you guys, since you are my friends and you actually care, right? I mean, here's what I'm realizing is that I thought I was like done with codependency. And I think I mentioned this before. I taught a class in codependency. Like I was like, okay, check off list. I'm good. I've conquered this. I have not. The more I get into detail about the research about this, the more I realize, holy cow, I still have some growth to do. So I asked myself some questions, and I'm writing them in a Google Doc for the new program. But I was like, you know what? I think it'd be really helpful if I ask my crew these questions too. So today I'm going to ask you these questions. And I'm just going to be doing prompting with you. There's no like right or wrong answer. And I need you to like put me on pause to think about these questions or write them down and think about them throughout the week. Because it's not like kind of like a one and done type of situation. You really want to unpack this. You want to park here on each one of these questions. And I promise the more you park and the more you kind of dive deeper and deeper, the more you're going to discover that you might not, you might have more things to work on than you think you do. And the more golden nuggets you can find about who you are, right? Which is super important because discovering who we are, know thyself, is really helpful because we have an addict in our lives, most likely abusive, telling us terrible things about ourselves. So if we know who we are, and we're solid in that, then we can rebuke all of this negative venom that they try to throw at us. And then later on in the podcast, I'm going to read you one of my new favorite poems. It's 5 seconds long, but it actually talks a lot about who we are. So, ready for the questions? All right, remember, no judgment. It's just you and me. And I, am far from perfect. And so I'm probably, the way you answer these questions, I'll probably be able to join you and say, yeah, me too, in a lot of them. Okay, question number 1. Actually, I'm sorry. Let's back it up for a second. I got really excited about asking you the questions. And I know you're probably very frustrated and be like, Michelle, get on with the questions. I will. But these questions are all ways that you can tell if you have healed from codependency or not healed from codependency. Does that make sense? So question number one, have you learned to esteem yourself? Okay, so that's huge. Have you learned how to esteem yourself? So if you can answer, yes, Michelle, I have learned how to esteem myself. Well, then that's one wonderful sign that you have healed from codependency. But if you say, no, Michelle, I actually don't. I rely on other people's opinions of me. I still allow that conversation with my dad to shake me, or I literally look to my partner to help me feel better or maybe even worse about myself. Or I look to my kids' performance or their happiness or their success as a way to validate myself as a mom. Or I'm still relying on outside influences to make me feel good. So I still find self-esteem through driving a car or a fancy car, or maybe a piece of jewelry, or maybe your looks, or maybe your diplomas, how much academic success. Those are all outside ways to esteem yourself. They're not healthy ways at all to esteem yourself. So esteeming yourself and having good self-esteem means knowing you were born with value and with wonderful traits, and knowing what those traits are and embracing those and not letting anyone talk you out of those traits. It also means having good self-esteem means admitting to yourself and to others that you are not perfect, and that you do have some negative traits that you're growing on, that you're working on. That you're having good self-esteem means that you forgive yourself for those negative traits, and that you say, my self-growth, my healing, my self-esteem is constantly growing. There's not an end point. I will be growing until the day I die. So while I'm on that journey of growth and healing and loving myself and finding self-esteem, I'm going to consistently choose to forgive myself. And you guys know this about me if you've been listening for a while. One of my worst, I don't want to say worst traits, but one of my biggest struggles is I am dyslexic, and I have dyscalculia too. So I get dates and times wrong. So yesterday I showed up for a dentist appointment on the wrong date. And I would love to tell you that happens very rarely. It happens weekly. I just read numbers incorrectly. And rather than getting in the car and being embarrassed because I walked in and they were like, what are you doing here, Michelle? Your appointment's tomorrow. And I'm like, no, I've double checked, triple checked. And they're like, no, really? And I was like, you know what? Of course it is, because I do this all the time. And I actually said that out loud. And to them, to the receptionist, and they laughed and I laughed, and I was like, okay, see you tomorrow. And I get in the car, and I could beat myself up about it. I could sit there and feel embarrassed about it. Or I could go, oh my gosh, they think I'm so disorganized. But instead, I just admit, look, my brain doesn't work that well in that area, and I see numbers are confusing to me. And so I'm going to not worry or, beat myself up. I'm going to laugh. And then I'm also going to look at my dentist is 30 minutes away. So it took a little over an hour to go there and back out of my busy day. And I was like, but instead of me sitting here getting upset that I took an hour out of my day and judging myself for it, I'm going to just go, I got to listen to the Codependency audiobook and learned a lot more about codependency. And that was a great opportunity. And guess what? I get to do it again today. So it's like that. It's looking at yourself and really embracing, everything about yourself, not just the positive things, right? It's not pretending that you don't have negative traits. Of course you do. We all do. So question number 1, have you learned to esteem yourself? And the key word being yourself. Number 2, do you know how to set boundaries? Y'all listen, you've heard me say it over and over and over again, and I know you're going to be like, Michelle, stop saying it. And I'm going to be like, no, I'm not going to stop saying it, because we've got to do this together. Me too. Our lives are constantly changing. We're growing into people that we we're called to become, where our relationships are changing. Our boundaries are fluid. It's great to have set boundaries, but they have to be flexible. You have to reevaluate your boundaries every couple months and go, how is this boundary working for me? Is it serving me well, or is it maybe a little off? Do I need to readjust? Is it too rigid? Is it not rigid enough? How am I doing sticking to my boundaries? Or am I like making excuses for them or letting people talk me out of my boundaries? You got to constantly take self-inventory of your boundaries. Boundaries are something that you must learn, period. End of subject. There's a lot of things in life that you don't need to learn in order to be happy. Boundaries are a must. Must, must, must. Without them, we will continue to be codependent. We will continue to be victim to other people's agendas and victim to not having control over our lives. We let other people control us. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. They're so important. I wrote an entire program about them. You must master them. You cannot get to happiness without them. And I know I have friends whose boundaries are a disaster. They don't have them. And then guess what? Those friends are so resentful. They're resentful of their kids. They're resentful of their husbands. They're resentful of their life because they don't have the ability to, or they do have the ability. They just don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to upset people. They don't want to be considered selfish, or they don't want to be, ruffle anyone's feathers. And that is BS. I promise you, people will like you better if you stand for something and you have self-respect. And the people that won't like you when you set boundaries are the takers. They're the moochers. They're the ones that rely on you kind of being a sucker and always saying yes. And they're going to be like, what? Wait, no? And then you're going to be like, yeah, I'm saying no and I'm sorry, but this is my new thing. And they're going to go find another sucker and they're not going to bother you anymore. And that's going to feel really refreshing. And you're going to feel like 1,000,000 pounds lifted off your shoulders. So boundaries are really scary to implement at the beginning, but you'll get in the rhythm and then you're just going to be a boundary queen. Like I had a year of no, a whole year, guys, where I was so overwhelmed. I was so burnt out. I actually got shingles because I was so stressed from saying yes to too many things. And then finally I was like, you know what? Darn it. I'm having a year of no. And so everything that was asked of me, my immediate answer was a no. And then I would have to convince myself to make it a yes. But it was just immediately no. Michelle, do you want to lead this? No. Michelle, can you volunteer for this? No. Michelle, would you like to go? No. Michelle, can you? No. And I'm talking ruthless no. Like I'm talking like things that people were like, really? No? For example, teacher-parent conferences. No, I'm not driving into school and sitting down with you and talking about my kid for an hour. We can do it over the phone. Or we can work it out over email. That's a little extreme. I will admit it. But I really had to ask myself, is this valuable? And with teacher-parent conferences, my kid goes to school, one of them goes to school 45 minutes away. That's 45 minutes of driving time there, meeting time back. No, I can accomplish just as much meeting with you over the phone. There's no need for me to come into your office. And don't ask me why I had to come into their office. Let's just say it's not all good. So that's okay. That's okay. I think it was my kid said fart or something stupid in class. He's a jokester, but whatever. Point is, you got to be like very, very real with yourself and ask yourself, do I want to even do this too? I also started saying no to large group events. So like parties or like charity events or whatever. I hate those things. You guys, I know people who love them and I love those people, but I cannot do large groups. I love intimate one-on-one conversations or one-on-three conversations with girlfriends come over to my house, or I go over to theirs, or we go to lunch, or we go for a walk. I do not like getting dressed up and going to a large event. And for me, it feels like a bunch of fake talk and, small talk where we don't talk about anything real. And it's only like, I'm attending this so that other people can see I was invited, so that I will get invited to other events. And I'm a who's who. And you know what? I've never wanted to be a who's who. I'm not a who's who. I don't care about who's who. I'd rather be at home with my kids in my pajamas, having meaningful conversations and pouring into my family, and then forming, 1 to 5 really great friendships. I like my world small. I don't particularly like big. And so that's just me. And there's nothing wrong with big at all. Just want to put that out there as a disclaimer. But so I say no. I still say no. Now we have COVID, so we don't do those events anymore. Thank you, Jesus. But I do not do those big events anymore. So that's my no. And that feels really good. And as soon as I made the decision, like, why am I doing this? It feels liberating. It feels empowering. And I know it's a boundary. So now I can just, next time I get an invitation, it will be a very polite, no, thank you. Okay. Question number 3. So wait, before we move on to 3, let's bring it back to you. What are your boundaries? And if you're like, Michelle, what's a boundary? Go get the program. If you're like, Michelle, I have boundaries, but I'm not sure if they're healthy, go get the program. If you're like, Michelle, I've got boundaries, I got your program, it's very helpful, reevaluate them, right? Like constantly reevaluate them. And if you're like, I have, and they're awesome, and they're working for me, high five to you, because way to rock on with your bad self, because you are killing it if you have got your boundaries in place and you're exercising, and I'm proud of you. Okay, number 3, do you own your own reality? This has been such a mega game changer for me. Sorry, that's my laundry. I still got to do laundry even though the kids are in school. Multitasking here. Reality, listen, here's the deal. Codependency, one of the major aha moments for me about researching codependency in the last couple months is, and I'm going to speak for myself, I really have struggled in my life with reality, like actually not being, okay, let me give you an example. And this doesn't have anything to do with addiction. But it's one of the things I've really noticed, me struggling with lately. And I am being very real with you. I think I have struggled with how my body really looks as opposed to what I think it looks. And, a couple people have said, oh, Michelle, I think you struggle from body dysmorphia. That's what it's called. And I'm like, no, of course not. I really think it's not, I don't know if it's body dysmorphia, but I do think it's a sign of my codependency that I look at my body and I think I am bigger than what I really am. And I don't know where that comes from, and I'm still unpacking it, but I sit here and I go, okay, I know that the reality is not matching up with my imagination. And it made me think of my first marriage, being married to someone suffering from addiction. I think for a long time, because I was in that relationship for 10 years, I did not accept the entire reality. So I knew there was a drinking issue, but I did not really accept the infidelity. The reality that my husband throughout our marriage was sleeping with other women. I didn't accept the reality that my husband was using very serious drugs. I knew I was willing to accept, he has a drinking problem and he runs away from the family a lot and he doesn't come home. But in my mind, I was like, I'm believing him. He's at a hotel by himself, struggling on his own, getting drunk, watching sports. The reality was that he wasn't alone. He was with other women and with other friends, and he was doing a lot more than drinking. So if you had asked me, I would have said, oh no, I am completely realistic. I know my husband suffers from addiction, but I really wasn't embracing the entirety of the reality, all of this. And so, I think codependents really, really struggle with full reality, whether it's, good or bad, right? So that's why I kind of gave those two extreme examples. So ask yourself, do you really own your current reality? Okay, question 4. Do you take care of your needs and wants most of the time? Oh my goodness. I said most of the time. Yes, I did. Most. So not some of the time, not like 2 days of the week, but the other, you guys, I'm so bad with math. I'm trying to do the math in my head, but you're never going to trust me again. 5 days of the week, 5 days of the other 5 days of the week. Do you struggle? Listen, I am very good at words. I am very good at research. I'm very good at writing. I'm just not good at numbers, clearly. So, okay. So guys, let's be honest with each other. How many times have you thought, I am exhausted and I need to go to bed early, but you push yourself and you do 1 or 2 other things on your to-do list for the day? Or how many times do you think, I just need to have a pajama day where I eat pancakes and bacon for breakfast and I watch TV and I, play board games with my kids, and I don't leave the house. But instead you push yourself to go to take your kid to soccer practice, or you push yourself to vacuum the living room. How many times do you, when your husband or your loved one is all up in their addiction and they're behaving very poorly, do you, in the middle of that chaos, when you feel like everything's falling apart, how many times do you stop yourself and go, okay, that's a lot of noise, and that is a lot of self-destruction and dysfunction going on over there, and I'm going to remove myself from that. I'm going to detach from that. Even if it's under my roof, I'm going to walk into another room, because unless you live in a studio apartment, you got other rooms. And you walk into another room and you ask yourself, you get really still and really quiet and go, okay, what do I need right now? And it might be you need to leave, you need to take your kids and go play in the park and the playground for a little while. Or it might mean you need to call a friend who you have a great relationship with, or a family member. It might mean you need to put on your favorite show and bake some cookies. Whatever it is, it might mean a bath where you lock the door and you remove yourself. It might mean listening to me and going for a walk, which I would be so honored if you did, because I would love to be in your ear while you go on a walk. But whatever it is, how often are you checking in and tuning in with yourself and going, all right, this is what I want. This is what I need. And if that's not being done on a daily basis, I would really encourage you to start making that a routine and a habit in your life. I do that, not all the time, totally not consistent. I am pretty consistent, but I'm not perfect. And every day I wake up and I go, okay, what does my body need right now? What is my spiritual being need? What does my family need? And then I kind of weigh them all out and kind of line them all up according to what's healthiest for me. Okay, so do you take care of your needs and wants most of the time? All right. Now, last question of the day. This is big. This is big for me. It's big for you. I know it. Last question. Do you express yourself with moderation? I know I hate that question so much because I'm like, ooh. Okay, moderation. So moderately. One thing I'm uncovering about codependency is when we are codependent, we are immature. We don't express ourselves with maturity because we feel all the feels. A lot of times we're very empathic, and we are extra a lot, right? But that's a good thing. I'm not saying that's a negative. But when we choose to express ourselves, particularly when we are dealing with stress and chaos and dysfunction of addiction, sometimes it can come across as very mean, right? I mean, come on, let's own it, right? I'm going to own it. I'll raise my hand. I used to scream. I used to yell. My kids will tell you that. They still remember me yelling and screaming at their father, when he would come home. I'd beg. If I wasn't yelling or screaming, I would beg. Like, I think there's been actually a couple times where I was on my knees begging. That's how sad I was and how desperate I was. I cried. Not often, because I'm not, I'm a little lean more towards feisty than crying. Crying to me is vulnerable, and I don't trust many people with that. I'd nag. I'd express myself with nagging a lot. So I'd just follow him around, or I'd call, trying to get him to pick up a gazillion times to see if his voice would be like sober, or if I could tell you. I'd even follow him around, guys. I'd get in my car, and if he wasn't home, I'd pile my kids in the car. They were too young to know what I was doing. But I would go from bar to bar looking for him at all his usual spots. I never went in when I knew he was with his friends, except for one time when he was alone. And that was when we were first dating. I never went in. I never had the courage or the guts to confront him face to face. I just needed to see his car. That's ways. I just pointed out all of the very unhealthy ways I expressed myself without moderation. Those are all really bad habits that I needed to unlearn and I did unlearn them. Actually, I unlearned them before I left him. Because you guys know I decided to leave, and then I stayed in that relationship for a year while I was working on myself and figuring out my life. But that's when I was like unlearning my expression, or to express myself. And I really grew up. I went from being that little kid that had a huge temper tantrum, like she was, a little girl, and, disappointed and hurt. And I no longer was that little girl with the temper tantrum. And I grew up and really matured into the young woman that I was, and learned how to say, I'm angry, or I'm sad, or what you just did really hurt my feelings, without all of the extraness, which I think is a sign of maturity. Because when I would express myself with him, when I was having my temper tantrum, it was actually a manipulation to get him to do what I wanted him to do. And then when I grew up and matured, I was expressing myself for me, not to try to get him to change. It was a very healthy, mature expression of my feelings that I felt gave myself a voice, but without all of the expectations behind it. And that's really where my growth started happening. Because then if I said, look, I understand that I have been with you for years and years and years, and you leaving, on a Thursday night and coming back home on a Saturday has been kind of quite the norm. And I've allowed you to come in and out of this house whenever you pleased, whenever it was convenient for you, because was so grateful just to see you alive and have you back here. But I'm no longer that woman. I've grown into someone better, and I have better needs and wants and expectations of my partner. So if you're planning on leaving again, I would love for you to continue to leave and not come back, because that's not the type of marriage that I want to be a part of. I need somebody who is going to be home when they say they're going to be home and not run away. And when I said this to him, truly in my heart, I did not expect him to respect what I was saying. I knew he would deflect. I knew he would argue. I knew he would be defensive. And I knew there'd be a lot of noise after what I just said. But I didn't even hear it. I wasn't even interested in it. I wasn't emotionally invested in his response. I was just incredibly proud of what I said. I was interested in my delivery and my choice of words. And I wasn't interested in the result, because truthfully, it was very unrealistic for me to expect him to go, well, okay, Michelle, I completely understand what you're saying, and I'm so sorry for hurting your feelings. I love you, and I am willing to change. Let me just go get back in my car and go to an AA meeting and commit to sobriety for the rest of my life. Like, that's not going to happen, right? Would be phenomenal, but not going to happen. Instead, I'm going to get anger or defensiveness or maybe even an apology, but he's going to leave and come back. It didn't matter. It was the fact that I had spoken up for myself, and I started to break that pattern of manipulation and temper tantrums. I was learning to express myself with moderation. And then, he would leave and he didn't come home again. And that's okay, because at that point I was planning on exiting anyways. I was just practicing new healthy skills while I was figuring out, okay, where was I going to live and how was I going to, who my lawyer was and how was I going to be able to afford, living on my own, and all of the things you think of when you plan on leaving. So those are the questions for you guys. And I just wanted to throw in my life experiences, so you knew that your struggles are not in vain. I am right there with you. I've experienced everything you're going through, and so have all of the other thousands and thousands of women that are listening to this. Even though we're kind of a secret community, we are very, very big community, and we all can stand with you and say, we're walking through this with you. You don't have to do this alone. And what you are experiencing, you might think is so isolating and so unique. And it is. It's unique to all of us. And there's so many of us out there that kind of live in this quiet, silent, secretive world. And that's so unhealthy, because that's what addiction wants. Addiction wants us to remain silent and secret and cover up and walk around feeling ashamed for something we didn't cause or control and can't control. That's kind of the goal. And when we listen to these podcasts or we join a secret Facebook group, when we reach out to each other, I know a lot of you in the secret Facebook group have met up in real life, maybe before COVID, but that's how addiction loses its power over you. It really is. When you start to drop that whole shame shenanigans and refuse to apologize for something that you didn't have anything to do with. When you give your feelings a voice, when I use this example all the time. When you're in the grocery store and you're checking out and you, in a 5-minute conversation with the cashier, somehow you've managed to share that you were married to an addict, that's freeing. That's when you know you've really, really are healing, because you're refusing to live in secret anymore. And that's when shame disappears, because you're shedding light on it. And the more you talk about it, the more you share about it, the more that it loses its power over you. So that is it for today. I love you. And I know that I always leave you, or I try to always leave you with some encouragement, because I was just telling my son today, I was driving him to school. He's 9 and he's so like an old man. His name is Henry. Even his name is like an old man name. And he was asking me about my first marriage, which I think is incredible, because what 9-year-old cares about your marriage? But he was, we were in carpool line, and he was like, so, why did you end up leaving? And I was like, well, because, he was addicted to drugs and alcohol, and he struggled with being faithful, and he's in the backseat and he's thinking about it. And he's like, well, I will never do that. I will never be unfaithful, and I will never get into drugs and alcohol. And for a split second, I thought about, I bet you my ex-husband thought the same thing when he was 9. Like, none of us start our lives wanting to mess them up so badly. This disease selects you. I don't believe that you select it. And that is one of the ways we can get into forgive, is we can think back to our loved ones when they were 9 in the backseat of their mom's or parents' or guardian's car at carpool, and think, I bet that 9-year-old had really big dreams and really big promises for himself or themselves. And how sad it is that they're struggling so badly. And how they want to get better, but maybe they don't have the coping skills, or maybe they don't believe in themselves enough, or whatever. They haven't been able to, and they may never be able to. And we can't sit there and wait around for them to decide to get better, to start our healing in our lives. So, I love you guys. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to say, let's get started with us. Let's forgive our partners and think of them as the 9-year-old in the back seat for a moment. And let's give ourselves the same grace. And we're all just trying to do our best. And so if you have listened to this and you've answered these questions, let me tell you, you are doing your best. You have more courage than most people out there, and you are going to be okay, because you are taking the time to invest in yourself, and you're striving and you're trying. And that is incredible. You're going to stumble, but you're going to get yourself back up, and I'm going to help you back up. And we're going to do this together, because I'm not leaving you. I'm going to be here. I have no intention of stopping anything anytime soon, because I'm committed to you, because I know I needed something when I was down and out. And my family really stepped up and helped me. And I want to do the same for you and remind you, you deserve a wonderful life. And no matter how old you are, it is never too late to get it. You just got to keep doing the work, and you are doing it today. And I am so incredibly proud of you. And I believe in you, and I believe in your happy future. I really believe in it. I really do. I know you're feeling desperate and sad and alone sometimes. And I just want to be that very loud voice in your head that's like, listen to this. I've got you. You can do this. You can get through this. There is a better way on the other side. But you got to walk here. You got to walk through it. You can't just jump automatically to better. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. It'd be great if it did. But you actually have to do the work. You have to go through this. It's like a swamp. And you're in the middle of the swamp and your legs are hurting and it's 1 foot and slow. And you're like, oh, is this ever going to end? Yes, it is. There's an end to the swamp and you're going to come out of it and it's going to feel amazing. So, and I'm going to be there for you every step, every single step. All right. Love you guys. I'll talk to you next week. Hey, I just had to add something really quickly. I recorded that podcast for you yesterday, but today I just finished working out and I was checking my email on my phone and my daughter just emailed me from school saying that her best friend, Catherine, watched videos on YouTube about codependency last night. And I thought, oh, what a victory. So you guys, we're changing the generations. We're the ones that are willing to talk about codependency and make sure that future generations are not getting in abusive relationships or have boundaries. And I'm just so proud and I'm so happy that my 17-year-old daughter's friends are now learning about codependency. So I thought you guys would love to hear that, and I couldn't wait to share with you. All right, have a good week. Bye.
This podcast is created for your support, encouragement, and entertainment with Michelle's personal thoughts and beliefs. From one woman to another, bonded together by the fact we love someone suffering from addiction. This is not intended as a substitute for therapy or advice from a professional.